What's in your book of shadows? Greetings, everyone. That's what we're going to be talking about today. What's in my book of shadows? I think some of you have expressed to me a curiosity about my book of shadows. Maybe not necessarily what is in your book of shadows, but what is in a book of shadows, or what do you think is in a book of shadows? And that's what we're going to talk about today. I've been on my channel. I've had this channel since the year, I think 2013 perhaps. So it's about 6 or 7 years old. And at that time, or even before maybe, it was very common for witches to share Book of Shadows videos. They would do videos on Book of Shadows, the idea of a Book of Shadows, mostly about ones that they were making or how they were going to make their Book of Shadows artistically, mostly artistically. It became like an art thing. Like, I think in recent years, or I don't know how many years, but for me, like, you know, we talk about our bullet journals. Many of us are a bit artistic in the way we put our bullet journals together, with imagery, pages of imagery, with you know, as far also with information, all kinds of information, you know, and I have shared that before, things that I put in that. But my Book of Shadows, I have not shared with it. My Book of Shadows is rather simple, but it's very important to me. It is a very important possession. It is something that I would guard. I would guard. I would not want anybody to take it. But not because I've spent a lot of time into it. It's not because I've spent a lot of time into it, making it pretty. It's not about that. But first of all, I want to talk to you a bit about the result of this period of time on YouTube, when everybody was making these beautiful Book of Shadows, was that to me they became sort of impersonal. And I think even today, you could, if you did a search for Book of Shadows on something like Pinterest, you'd probably find some beautiful examples. You probably could go on eBay and search for Book of Shadows. Or not eBay, I mean Etsy. Go to Etsy and search for Book of Shadows, and you probably find Book of Shadows for sale. A lot of people have made beautiful things that they want to, you know, beautiful covers or whatever. They became romanticized, I think, during the time, I'm going to say, movies like Practical Magic, which we all love, or TV series like, you know, Charmed, where the witches involved were looking into the Book of Shadows for spells to use, but they were elaborate. You know, it was beautiful leather-bound books with ornate decoration, and maybe the pages were calligraphed or beautifully illustrated, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's really nothing wrong with that at all. But I think what was happening during this period of time on YouTube, my earlier days on YouTube, was that people were becoming very, very involved in the elaborateness of the page and making the page appear beautiful, but they were less concerned about what was on the page. And what I mean by that, they seemed to find the things that they needed for their Book of Shadows. Like, I want to put in about color, correspondences, magical correspondences for different colors, magical to use in candle work or whatever, or magical correspondences of different herbs or stones. That's important information. It's important information. How about the Sabbaths and the Aspects, perhaps, or full moon, or, you know, whether it's a full moon or new moon, or maybe some planting information, whatever. If you're going to use it, if you're not somebody who cares at all about herbology or cares at all about using gemstones, you know, crystals and gemstones, or not at all about animal magic, or not at all about, or you don't intend to do any spell work at all, or you do intend to do those things, but do not include to hold rituals in any way in your personal rituals, you don't have any reason to have those included in your Book of Shadows. That's what I want to say. Your Book of Shadows has to be personal to you, and that's why, you know, going on someplace like Etsy or going someplace like or Pinterest and just copying what other people have done is not really necessarily going to do you much good, magically speaking. It might be great fun to do. It may be beautiful. You might be very proud of your work and proud of having the book and love your book. But if you're not going to use what's inside it, it's not a magical tool. A witch's book of shadows is very much a magical tool. Okay? I was curious because one thing I wanted to say, my husband reminded me when I talked about it, a lot of people refer to the Book of Shadows as a grimoire. And I was going to refer to this book, which I still am, Grimoire for a Green Witch, which I have showed you before. This is a book by Anne Morrow, which is a good book for a lot of reasons for beginners, particularly. But the reason I wanted to refer to it, I was going to refer to it, and my husband reminded me to explain to you what is meant by the term grimoire. And to me, it's always been sort of another word for Book of Shadows. It just so happens that within this grimoire for the Green Witch, Anne Morrow has put a definition of grimoire in here in her craft terms, in a glossary of craft terms here, and she says it is related to the word grammar. It talks about relating to the word grammar, which were books of magical formulas created by ceremonial magicians between the 12th and 16th centuries in Europe. Well, doesn't that talk to me? Which had elaborate rituals and stuff, etc. And it talks about it also having, so it had information about rituals. It had information about correspondences and correlations between objects and magical powers, about sigils and other information, this term has recently come into use for the Witch's Book of Shadows. And the Book of Shadows, of course, the shadow is the secrets, a witch's secrets. And she talks in here in the same glossary about a book of shadows is a book or books in which correlations are written down and referenced in creation of spells and other magics in which the characteristic of the witch's practice are given. Okay? So it has all kinds of things. It could have her philosophy, her personal ethics, her insights, her meditations. It could have be journaled, lunar and seasonal rituals, description of tools, recipes, anything which she deems necessary for her individual practice of the craft. And that's the key word. Whatever is necessary for your individual practice should be in your Book of Shadows. Okay. Now, I do all kinds of things. I do all kinds of keeping. I keep some things. I do journaling. I keep tarot spreads and tarot readings in my bullet journal. Because that's not secret. That's something, if somebody saw it or read it, I wouldn't have any problem with it. I have stuff all the time about, the aspects and the Sabbats. All kinds of information. How that's related to my life. But I don't have any texts or rituals in here. I have texts or rituals in my own Book of Shadows. I don't have magical correspondence. I don't have spells in here. I don't write down spells. Oh, this is a really good spell. And I put it in my bullet journal. No, my bullet journal stays out all the time. People can see it. I carry it with me. I take notes. When I go to meetings, I would take it with me and note in it. I've even given it to people that were given a job by me to oversee something that was organized in my journal to keep track of, to take notes from whatever they were doing. So this has left my hands a few times. It's not anything that I guard. It's not anything secretly that I guard. My Book of Shadows is something secret. The only eyes that belong in my Book of Shadows are my own eyes or my husband's eyes. Other eyes do not belong. I have a friend who's a Christian friend, and she journals all the time, and she has an inscription in her journal that I thought was really a good inscription. It begins, it's the Christian prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, throw this journal in a lake. which means if I die, please, and you find this journal, please destroy it. Don't let it become, it's private. It's my private thoughts. And I thought that was kind of appropriate because that's really what a Book of Shadows is. Okay, now how do you know what you want to go? If you're somebody who's beginning, how would you know what to keep in your Book of Shadows? This is the reason for showing you this book. This is only one of many books. I just trust her. She's good. She's a good writer in here. She gives you straight. There's so much information. I've shared this book in the past. So much information in here because it has all about. It gives you, first of all, a glossary of terms, but it also has rituals. It contains rituals in here. That you might want to use for different things, like during the Sabbaths or during the Esbats. It lists about when the Sabbaths and Esbats are. It lists, but it has actual text of rituals. So if you're somebody who doesn't have, you're a solitary practitioner and you don't have any idea what could be in a ritual, you could read through these rituals and you could get an idea of what kind of a ritual. What would I do if I want to consecrate? Excuse me, I have hiccups. If I want to consecrate magical tools, what would I do? I could look in here and I could there could be a ritual, and me thinking a ritual or some text in here that you could use. What would I do if I want to call in the elementals when I'm passing a circle? What would I say? It tells you in here what you could say, okay? What do you do? What's the difference of what I do at a full moon, what I do at a new moon, okay? Here it has things like, so it has all about Sabbaths. Then it has all about different, we want to call them here, she calls them recitations, which are like blessings that you give yourself, or calling in different chants or songs, or, some different common things that might belong in a pagan ritual. It has all kinds of things, and it talks about rituals like for hand fasting. There's all kinds of things. If you don't ever intend to do that, I wouldn't put that in yours. You could. Is there anything wrong with just using this? Oh, it also has, then we get into the influences and association. It has spellcrafting and correspondences, all about different things. This is where it's talking about the witch's sigil, color correspondences, daily influences, elemental herbal correspondences, properties of trees, Sabbath incenses and herbs, different Sabbaths you can use, smudges, planetary associations, zodiac associations, numbers, using numbers in divination, runes, energy points, dark power herbs and plants, so using stones and crystals, deity images, all kinds of things. It's such a comprehensive book. I haven't used half of the stuff in there. I don't. So this would not be my Book of Shadows, but this is a good starting off point if you want to make your own Book of Shadows. What kind of things you might want to put in yours? What kind of things you might want to include? It's just a good place to look. You don't necessarily copy them. But my Book of Shadows. Excuse me, I need to zip here. Remember I said you could use a Book of Shadows and it could be plural. We do own several Book of Shadows. But for our personal solitary practice, we really have one. Some of the information is duplicated elsewhere that's not private. For the most part, anything that is private, anything that is text from rituals that the two of us have done or would do in the future, mostly what happened in here was the rituals in here were a time when the only rituals we ever did were solitary. Quite a few years ago, we began attending rituals, public rituals, and also then we've done some private rituals with others. But those things are not in here. Those things are secret to whoever I was with. The public ritual, the text that we used during that ritual was for the people in that room at the time only. It was not published in any way outside there. I don't take that outside of that circle of trust that we had together while we did the ritual. And that's very true, however you do. So it's also very true of my husband and I. These rituals that we did for ourselves, we wrote the text that was appropriate for what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do the ritual, and we used it to read. And in that time, I started to read, because there were two of us, I started writing in color coding, in colors, whether we said, I said something, it would be in a color, he said something, it would be in a color, we say it together, it was in a third color, or it was black or whatever. However we did it, we had it written, so that it was easy for when we did the ritual, we would write the ritual, and then when we actually did the ritual, we would have the book there for us to follow while we did the ritual. And it was easy to see. It was easy to look at it. Oh, it's coming up blue. It's your turn. Okay, that's how we did it. And that has sort of carried on. I don't think you can see it, but that has carried on in my book. If you can see it or not, it's probably too glary. But that's the only thing pretty, if you want to call anything pretty, in my book, is I do write in different colors. I write in different colors all the time. Now, it's not for any other reason other than it's easy for me to find something. It's easy for me to locate something if it's in a color. It catches me on the page. If everything's in black, it's hard to find since I don't have a table of contents or anything like that. It's just written. And sometimes I can say, oh, I remember doing that. It should be in, I did that in red ink. So I can find when I'm leaving through, every time I say, oh, red, a big text of red. Oh, here's a big text of red. And here I have this big text of red. I would look there first. Okay. Now, what is my actual book? My actual book is a book that my husband actually made this book. He made it as a journal. He made it as an art. It was actually for an art competition that we were having with our medieval group, and he bound this book. He made it and bound it as an art entry. He sewed it all and applied the bounding. It's leather bound, and it was just blank pages. It was just blank pages, and it was just meant to be. We thought afterwards we would use it for a journal or something, and we decided to use it for Book of Shadows because it was just a lovely book, and it was I wanted something special for the Book of Shadows, but I didn't want to have it real ornate, or I didn't want to spend all the time on it, and this is our main Book of Shadows. It's not the only, like I said, it's not the only one we have. We have other things, other places, but what I really want to remember and keep is in here. The rituals are in here. If I would just go through and see what's in here. I do have some ideas about what our beliefs are, what we believe, like that would be called. We have ways that we wanted to set up altar ideas, little diagrams for altar ideas, because when we did rituals alone, we did them together. We didn't do one person running the ritual. Like the public rituals we did, it was one person. It was a high priestess running the ritual. And then after a while, she had a man do work with her a little bit, and he did parts of it. But basically, it was her running the ritual. It was her ritual, and he assisted. Okay, and that's sort of a common thing. When my husband and I did these rituals, we did it together as two equal people doing the ritual. So we redid it. We redid certain things, and our altar setup was a little different, perhaps, than what maybe Anne Morrow might suggest in this book. We used, I could compare. I think I remembered at the time. Ours was a little different. We had some variations, also varying depending on what kind of an altar we were using. So we would do different kinds of. Diagrams. It's something we did. This really worked well. Let's put it in the book so we remember for the future. That kind of thing. That's that kind of thing. I have some herbs in here that I love to work with and what I like to use them for, and the same with essential oils. We did special things for our tools. Anytime we get a new tool, we tend to, we consecrate the tool in some way, call it into serving our service. Like I do for even my tarot decks. I do that with tarot decks. And I'm going to do a video on how I bind my tarot decks to me, because they're for my use. And I develop a relationship, a bond, so to speak, with my tarot decks. So I have a special little ritual that I do for my tarot decks. I have stuff about candle magic because I do love, I do like to use color magic. I of course have stuff for the Esphits and the Sabbats in here. We do observe the Wheel of the Year, and I have rituals in here for that. Because even though we might, even in times when we did celebrate public rituals, we still did our own private ritual for the Sabbats, most of the time. We never celebrated Esphits with the public rituals, so we have some things that we did for the Esphits at home. We didn't actually do rituals usually, but we usually did certain things. Housekeeping, you might want to call it. That I've shared some of those things with you. Okay, so those things might be in this book. But the Sabbats particularly would include the incenses that I use for the blends that I make. And I know I have shared some of those on video before, how I go about picking the incense, the different herbs and things that I want to use for particular blends. I'll have that in here, and I've shared that in the past with some people here on YouTube. I've had about doing things like witches kitchen bottles for the witches bottles for the kitchen, or the jars that I bury. I have the things that I put there, or different kind of spells. I have some texts for different spells in here, particularly indicating when I have a spell that really worked for me. I would put it in here. If I did a spell and it did not work for me, it should not go in this book. You see, that's why it has to be personal to you. If you have a relationship with whatever that text is, whatever the wording is, whatever the chant is, if you come up with a chant for a particular kind of a spell or a ritual that really works for you, it should be in your Book of Shadows. Okay? Now, usually my book is just plain. Like I said, it has no index or anything. Usually I just have, I don't know if you can see here, but I have ribbons. I just use ribbons. Satin ribbon. It's satin ribbon. It's like a bookmark. I have 3 of them in here that mark the place for different things, particularly for when we want to do rituals or something, or whatever I'm working on. I would use the ribbons to mark. But I also, right now, if you can see if I hold it up, it's a mess. I've got all these Post-its stuck in here. They are not permanent. They do not stay in my book. They're here only for something that I'm working on right now that I needed to reference. I needed a reference of sorts to the things marked with these Post-its. So I will take those out as soon as I finish what it is that I was doing. They're temporary. They're absolutely temporary. And then they will just be pulled out. Okay? So I will use a poster for something like that, but they're not, like I said, they're not something that stays in there. Usually the only thing it is this book, the satin ribbons, the red, I just happen to have red satin ribbon, that's why I used it, and colored pens. Colored pens. And that's it. That's my Book of Shadows. There's nothing mysterious about the Book of Shadows, but it is very secretive. That's what I wanted to say to you. If you want to spend time and make it elaborate, make it beautiful, that's wonderful. I think they're really cool. I loved watching those movies too, or those TV shows too, where I saw those books and I went, oh, isn't that lovely? Wouldn't you love to have something like that? Well, I am somebody who does calligraphy and has, at least in the past, experienced quite a bit of experience with calligraphy and illustrating scrolls and things. And it would be possible for me to illustrate pages, but there's so much information, and for me, it's the magic of the information you know, how useful is the information for me. I want to, this is a tool. Again, this is a tool for me. It's wonderful to have beautiful things. It's wonderful to have beautiful things. But if the beautiful things don't work for you, it's a waste of, that's a waste. Yeah. At the same time, I think it should be special. I don't particularly like the idea of just using, you know, pages printed off the internet and stuck in page protectors and stuck in a 3-ring binder in your book of shadows. I think there's magic in writing something with your own hand. I know firsthand how difficult that can be, because I do suffer from arthritis, and my writing is sloppy as all hell. And I can't write long things at a time, but I do what I can. It's important for me. And in some places, no, I'll say some places my husband has written in here, but my husband suffers from arthritis as well, so you know. My husband also doesn't have the fascination with office supplies that I have, and he does not really appreciate colored pens. He's a black ink or a mechanical pencil kind of guy, which, yeah, I don't get that kind of guy. I mean, he's nice, but, you know, that's not me. That's not me. But anyway, he has written in here by hand. I just think write or print or whatever you need to do, I think your word is your power, and your word, whether it is spoken or written, is your power. Remember that. It is your intention. And if you are getting something and just copying it, printing it off the internet, it is not your intention. You can copy it from that page onto a piece of paper. That is an intention. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? And yes, that could be just a part of this 68-year-old woman being 68 and liking the old ways, but I stand by it. There is power in your words. Spoken or written, there's power in your words. So, I hope this gave you the information you needed. I'm happy to share information from my book of shadows whenever it's appropriate. You see the difference there. I'm not actually reading the text, and for the most part. I mean, I will read certain things. I'll read little chants or give you recipes for oils or things like that. But as far as like what happens during ritual, or, you know, and of course some spells are absolutely private. That's all I need to say. I hope this was interesting. I'd love to hear about your own book of shadows, if you have one, if you use one. If you don't use one, what your thoughts are on it. I'd love for you to share. I'm hoping that this has made some kind of a difference for somebody. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'm Rebecca, and I wish you blessings.